So my name's Jackie Driver. I chair an organisation called Breakthrough UK, which is a disabled people's user-led organisation in Manchester that focuses on employment and independent living rights for disabled people. I also currently work at Manchester Health and Care Commissioning, leading their inclusion strategy for them, and I'm seconded out from the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I also chair a couple of other organisations. I chair an organisation called Sign Health, which is an organisation that supports deaf people's access to mental health services. We are 70% deaf BSL users on the board, and we employ more deaf people than any other organisation in the city, actually, across our organisation nationally. I also sit on an advisory committee for an organisation called Result CIC, and Result works with disadvantaged communities to get access to coaching where coaching may not have been accessible before, and that includes disabled people, asylum seekers, refugees, homeless people, and so on. So that's me and my professional capacity. So it's an interesting question about when anybody first becomes involved with disability rights or any other rights actually. And so growing up in Manchester, as a deaf child, I was put through mainstream education in one of those kind of experiments that puts you through a system that doesn't actually support you. So for me, trying to access the teacher when the teacher's back was turned was quite difficult, as you can imagine. And so I didn't come out of education with very much in terms of qualifications. I was very good at art, because you didn't need the teacher to tell you what to do there. So I managed to work my way into working out for a couple of years in the factory, and actually on the way home one day from the factory I happened to go into the local college, Withenshaw College, that had just been built, to use the toilets because I was desperate for it. And as I came out, there was somebody there with a clipboard that said, "Don't you want to sign up for some courses?" And I said, "Well, no, because I wasn't really very good at school, so I'm not." So at the end of that conversation, I'd signed up for art, and they, because it was at the time when you used to be able to get grant-funded education, I ended up signing up for sociology and psychology as well. I was supported through the college to get through those. Went to Liverpool to the art college there, did my degree in sculpture, and came out of that thinking, well, you can't really do much with sculpture, can you? Settled into doing my City and Guilds in carpentry and joinery was the next kind of connection. And it was there really that equalities first kind of there was recognition for me about inequalities in society. Of course, I was the only woman on the course, I was the only person that couldn't get an apprenticeship, working in direct departments as a carpenter, when all your contemporaries are much younger than you, 16, 17, and I was a few years older. It was quite a challenge, and that kind of opened my eyes to discrimination and how it works really. And then from there, various different aspects of my career later, kind of made the connection between discrimination and how it affects a whole range of people, be it BAME, discrimination on grounds of race, on grounds of disability, on grounds of sexual orientation, gender, so on and so forth. Kind of made me recognise lost opportunities really, not just for myself but for other people. So I gradually worked my way into roles that enabled me to get more insight. I worked in homelessness for a long time. I worked with asylum seekers, refugees. I worked with disadvantaged and disenfranchised communities, and absorbed and understood a lot about the kind of barriers that are in society. And during that period of time, I kind of recognised the growth of the movement in disability rights, and of course that was very core to Manchester. Manchester, I'm sure you've heard already, has been the birthplace of a lot of the disability rights movement in this country, and actually internationally, the way it's impacted across that. So having the fortune to live here enabled me to get involved in the disability rights movement. And I very quickly had the opportunity to become the local authority's lead on disability equality for a few years in Manchester, at a time in the 80s of strong political will to address inequalities, and that opportunity really afforded me a great sense of understanding how to make the connections between disability rights and structural and institutional inequality. And so from there I went on to work for the Disability Rights Commission, and then subsequently to the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And throughout all of those organisations, really, my lived experience of disability has really helped me deliver in a way that I don't think I would have been able to had I not had that. And the reason I say that is that very recently you'll hear kind of dialogue around disability as an asset, and that was kind of the dialogue that goes right back to the 1980s, that wasn't really formulated. Obviously we were starting to formalise the social model of disability. It was only known at that time to disabled people and disabled people's organisations. And even if I just bring us right back to date now, working in health and care, with people who've worked in health and care for all of their lives really, and you give them some training on the social model, and they're kind of like light bulb moment, and they're kind of, well, of course, why have I not thought of this before? Why am I looking at the person, not the structure? And when I say the learning for me does come from, going back as far as working on things like the Macpherson report and understanding institutional racism for what it was. That's very easily translated across to other types of discrimination. And understanding institutional discrimination is one thing, and of course lots and lots of authorities have heard of it and understand it. What the individuals in the authorities don't recognise as well is that the institution is us. It's not the buildings and it's the people that deliver those services, that deliver those employment opportunities, and so therefore we can change it. So yeah, that was quite a long answer to a very specific question, but yes, lived experience and having lots of opportunities afforded to me to develop a career in tackling disability discrimination has been very advantageous to me to be able to move disability rights forward. Yeah, so Breakthrough UK, we've been in existence for a fair amount of time. You'll have heard, I'm sure, some of the other interviewees talk about Lorraine Gradwell, MBE. Lorraine was my chief exec for a number of years before she very sadly passed away. She was an absolute freedom fighter for disability rights. She wasn't Mancunian born and bred, she was from Newcastle, but she had actually she was from Durham, she was from the North East, and she had a very strong persona and will about her. She very kindly mentored me during my early years in the disability rights movement, and then eventually I became the chair of the organisation that she was the chief exec at. And she set the vision for Breakthrough UK, working with Manchester City Council, the local authority, who were willing to go out on a limb for supporting disabled people to lead their own services, Breakthrough is the service for employment for disabled people. It was at a time in the 1980s when disabled people, when we were given opportunities to work, we were all in the post room or where you weren't going to be seen. We still had supported employment in a way that was very derisory towards disabled people. Many disabled people still lived in segregated housing provision, and they still had segregated education. And in the early 80s, with the political U-turn on segregation for disabled people, what it didn't recognise was that you can't just put communities together and expect everything to be okay. So what happened was disabled people, the backlash was disabled people were seen to be the problem in the workplace, in the education, in the housing settings, rather than recognise that you needed to work together to remove the barriers in those services, rather than focus on the individuals. So there was kind of then a backlash around what should have been a good point of removing segregation. And Lorraine and the team at Breakthrough had made profound steps forward in challenging the employment and training opportunities that disabled people would face. And the most significant thing about Breakthrough is it's always been user-led. And there's been lots of charities along the way that have claimed to be user-led, but not really. They're there for profit and for opportunity, for charity. And Breakthrough, because it's been led by strong disability rights activists, in all of its time, has really understood and embedded and shown how the social model can work in practice. So of course, 70% of our staff are disabled people, 70% of our board are disabled people, and we show that in practice just how easy it is to do. These are not difficult things to address. Disability often gets put in the hard to do box. That reminds me of a time when I was at the Disability Rights Commission, when I led on the employment strategy there for many years, and interestingly, the types of employees that you work with, the ones that really got it well with small enterprises, the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, that actually you introduce to them a person who's fit for purpose for the job. You talk through the requirements that are needed, the adjustments that are needed in the workplace, and they go in there and very ready to leave. Because they're a good employee, usually. They're given the opportunities they need to flourish, and they don't really go anywhere else because everywhere else has been rubbish to work for. So you've got a really loyal, good, strong employee. The ones that report to getting really well, the large public authorities, are the ones that find it most difficult. And I think that's because they push people around the system. If something doesn't work for them, there's always somewhere else to send them. So you see disabled people in local authorities and health authorities just redeployed constantly in different places. It happens to lots and lots of disabled people. It happens very profoundly to people who have got sensory impairment, who are deaf or blind, and the very obvious things you can put in place to support deaf or blind people in the workplace just aren't there. Someone with a learning disability is the same thing. One of the most recent campaigns that we've had at Breakthrough UK has been around political representation. So we've just concluded a campaign supported by the Government Equalities Office to look at opportunities within elected office for disabled people. And my view is actually, it's very hard to know where's the best place to put all your efforts, because you're a small organisation where you put the efforts to make change. And in a sense, democracy has got to be one of those places for me, because until you've got disabled people representing you, and we have at the moment 1% of disabled people in Parliament, when disabled people make up 20% of the population as an average, then you're not going to get real shift and real change. So that for me is one of the areas that I'm very proud of Breakthrough engaging in, and that's to tackle and remove the barriers to both voting and access to elected office for disabled people. Our recent campaign, because of the funding, has been on disabled women, but we've had some great success in supporting those women to move forward in their chosen careers. So I have very good memories of lots of people, and when you work in the area of disability rights, of course you can expect that you lose a lot of people very early on, you lose a lot of friends and a lot of comrades, and in fact the list is probably too long to go into in terms of who we've lost. I mentioned Lorraine there, but Bert Massey, who was the chair of the Disability Rights Commission for many years, Liverpool, was a profoundly influential person in terms of both legislation and policy in this country. Many stories to tell about many people. But offered me the opportunity very early on in the Equality and Human Rights Commission to do an inquiry into disability hate crime. Back then, disability hate crime wasn't even a term that was coined. I was very privileged to be able to lead that inquiry. He alerted me to, it wasn't really a book, it was a pamphlet written by a group of disabled people in the South East who had started to collect the data about disabled people's experiences of hate crime. And nobody put two and two together, so I had a look at it and I thought, well, we can do a public legal inquiry into this to see if there's anything. This was called, the book was called Getting Away with Murder, written by someone called Catherine Quarmby. So we had a look at it, and the evidence looked to be something we should explore further. And of all of the work I've done, and I've worked across the criminal justice system for a long time, and I've done an awful lot of inquiries into some horrendous situations. I have never experienced having to read transcripts of such abuse, such serious and significant abuse and murder as I have with the disability harassment inquiry. It surpassed all expectations of what it would draw out. Had an opportunity during the course of that inquiry to, probably one of my proudest moments actually, to change the law in respect of the law at the time. If you murder a person because of their disability, you got half the equivalent sentence if you murdered them on race or sexual orientation or another protected characteristics. And it was simply an anomaly in law. As I was going through the law books and establishing it, kind of didn't look right to me, and I looked at it and I thought, this is not right. So, because I was doing the inquiry, I connected it with the then Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer, and then he said, it's not right. Does that make sense? And then we took it through various systems together. There happened to be a piece of legislation going through at the time, and the Home Secretary at the time, Ken Clarke, looked at it, and we thought it would get thrown out, and he just said, no, put it in this legislation, it's wrong. And to see something so simple change, I talked about sometimes change takes an awful long time, but sometimes you get a really limited opportunity to make a significant change quite quickly. And that really was a very proud moment for me. We had an opportunity to really shape the way in which disability, harassment and hate crime were seen, and consequently the criminal justice system, now every police force in the country, all 43 forces, accept reports of disability and hate crime and deal with them. Criminal justice system, the Crown Prosecution Service have developed really substantial policies to be able to support disabled people through the criminal justice system who experience such crimes. I think, as I say, part and parcel of people's lives, actually, very often we don't have the bandwidth to deal with getting the jobs and facing, tackling the discrimination when we have this kind of backdrop in our lives. So it's thanks really to the vast numbers of disabled activists up and down the country that have kept this alive and have kept the movement together in a very meaningful way. And some of that, I guess, of late has been more down to social media, being a great medium for being able to communicate more effectively and quickly. And we see, some of the great young disabled people's activists now who, campaign outside Parliament, outside, all of the places that 20 years ago, we were chaining ourselves to buses, or we were, campaigning against a whole range of things, and actually to see that continue is both it's a bittersweet moment. It's both sad and we're both, it's both sad, and I'm glad that it's happening. I'm glad that young disabled people are rising to the fore, because for me, we've got now two generations of disabled people who've been through our education system, a very different education system to the one I talked about that I've been through, where the support for the education system, the mainstream education, has been a lot different, and their expectations are a lot higher, and I love them being a lot higher, but at the same time it's very sad to see that we're still tackling the same issues. And on a final note for me from that, it's a bit like a colleague of mine recently said, it's like the bus that's going round and round, and people get off the bus and people get on the bus, and she says quite often when we got off the bus, the next generation come along, and here we have in Manchester a social care provision that wants to provide a new centre for independent living in Manchester. Fabulous, great, and really good. We've been asking for that since the 1980s, and we know what all the problems are, we know what all the issues are, but we've got off the bus and somebody else new has got on, and they've got this great new idea, but they're not listening to history. So the work that you do, I do applaud the work that the Beatles History Museum do in terms of capturing that history, because without the opportunity to see there's been fights for it before, and there's a background to this, we can't learn lessons. So